Welcome to the SparkRoom webinar series. SparkRoom provides full-service, data-driven marketing and technology solutions to ignite your performance marketing. Our webinars provide actionable advice and insight to help you better strategize, execute, analyze, and optimize your marketing campaign efforts.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Bryan, and I'm the Vice President of Corporate Marketing and Communications at SparkRoom. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Mind the Gap Between Marketing and Enrollment. Our speakers today are Steve Davis from Velocify and Marcello Paravicini from SparkRoom. I'm going to pass things off to them to introduce themselves and their companies briefly before we get started, but before I do, I want to let everyone know that you should feel free to submit questions or comments via the webinar interface throughout the presentation. I will either respond via the chat tool, or if appropriate, I will interrupt the presentation for clarification. So thank you for joining us today, and now I'm going to pass it off to Steve and Marcello.
Thanks a lot, Kathy. Thanks, Marcella, for joining, and thanks everyone in the listening audience for joining, because you're really the most important people. We're very excited to have you joining us today, and our hope here is that we give you something, some sort of a nugget or two that you can take and utilize and grow your enrollments with. So that's the goal here. My name is Steve Davis. I'm the Enterprise Account Executive for Higher Education at Velocify. I have been here for 3 years now at Velocify, basically running enterprise sales for higher ed. I also handle business development duties at Velocify, so conference speaking engagements, being a thought leader for WebExes like today with SparkRoom. Those are also parts of my duties here at Velocify. And overall, I've been in the EDU sector for 12 years. Everything I've done has been geared around helping schools grow enrollment. So admissions is my life, essentially. Marcello.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kathy. A little background myself. I've been working in higher education, directly or indirectly, for nearly 16 years at this point. In my role as president of SparkRoom, I serve two roles, one as a CMO and also as an operations consultant, if you will, for higher education, and helping as part of a team of consultants, higher education institutions in three areas: performance marketing technology, enrollment marketing, and enrollment management. What I mean by enrollment management technology, we provide solutions that give our client institutions in-depth insight into marketing performance and marketing dollars return on investment. Enrollment marketing really is what it is. We provide integrated marketing communication solutions. And enrollment management is the consultancy side, as well as other solutions that help institutions streamline the enrollment management process, or rather the inquiry to application and application to matriculation process. Today we're going to be talking about marketing and enrollment misalignment, specifically the degree to which tight coordination between marketing and admissions is essential to capture prospects on an enrollment journey that's increasingly more complicated than it used to be. We'll get into more detail in a minute. Also, we're going to talk about miscalculation of the prospect's attention limits. One way to summarize that for now is to say, prospective students face a big number of, rather a large number of communications from a number of competing institutions day in and day out. So when you're dealing with a prospective student and you're unable to effectively manage communications with him or her, chances are other institutions are doing so. So to be successful, you must be first and fast with communicating with those students, and most importantly, communicating effectively. We're also going to talk about failing to meet the student's prospect expectations, the degree to which, for example, the burden of the application process is taken off the student and adopted by the institution or the admissions team, and the degree to which an admissions team have the right tools to meet student prospects on their terms is critical in today's environment. We're also going to talk about insufficient enrollment insight. Specifically, every school should analyze what are the key performance metrics that are the basis to eliminate inefficiencies. And what we mean by that is, the degree to which you engage in insight, an in-depth analysis of how efficient or not the enrollment management operation is, and how to identify opportunities to remove or to improve on process variability, right? And lastly, post-application attrition, which is an important area. As many of you may know, a significant number of students fail to complete their first course or even their first module in distance education and traditional education. That's a significant problem when it comes to return adult students as well. So the degree to which post-application attrition can be addressed through putting in place proactive academic support services, among other efforts, is important. So I want to talk about the first gap in more detail: marketing and enrollment misalignment. The first area that's important to highlight has to do with what is a typical route to enrollment these days. And it used to be, for most traditional institutions, that you could engage with list brokers, let's just say NRCCOA, for example, and get a list of high school students, and beginning during their sophomore year, or as early as their sophomore year, typically during their junior year, begin the process of communicating through them through search, which is what we typically call direct mail in higher education, right? That combined with high school recruitment and direct high school recruitment, athletic recruitment, career fairs, and other type or college fairs and other type of more initiatives was sufficient to build a high school class. Since then, is one of the areas that has really impacted the manner in which we recruit students has to do with the degree to which that process is linear or not anymore. So how important it is for an institution to really understand how students today engage with the brand, how they identify opportunities, and how competitors have adapted to the current consumer behavior, if you will, and proactively manage that communication effort to maximize the probability of conversion, right? So the first thing that we talk about is how to target individuals across channels and devices. It's not longer about sending them a postcard or a view book or, an email communication alone. It's more about really understanding that consumer behavior and engaging with them across all channel devices in a manner that they're accustomed to engage with any other product and service. Most importantly, again, and I hate to highlight it, is you have to be mindful that your competitors are currently engaging prospective students in such a manner. Now, what I find interesting is that when, as a consultant, having approached a number of institutions in this area, you'll run into a lot of communications, or rather admissions people that also feel a communications and or marketing role that will tell you, we're already engaged in social media, we're already engaged in email communications. Yeah, but the degree to which the efforts are purely tactical executions in silo, as opposed to the deployment of a customer-centric strategy, is where I oftentimes find the disconnect. So again, it's about taking a look holistically at how students engage with the marketplace, if you will, and how the marketplace engages back. So the first thing I always recommend, what Sparkroom will recommend, is engage in an in-depth competitive analysis, understand how students are being engaged with across the landscape, and then make adjustments as need be, and don't hesitate to get feedback from your students as well.
Marcelo, I want to talk a little bit about the second point, which is targeting individuals across cross-channels and devices. There are numerous ways, obviously, that you can market to students and prospective students in today's marketplace. One of those is obviously text messaging. And I wanted to share a little anecdote from an existing client at Velocify, and just a way that you might think about text messaging as a messaging source for prospects. We have a top flight aeronautical school. They also do technology that we work with, and the school has basically taken a texting feature that we offer and has made it an integral part of its contact strategy with great success. And so the school basically uses SMS for appointment reminders, it's unique in the sense that now it's sending, that's typically what we would recommend, is you use texting for appointment reminders, or I missed an appointment and maybe I need to remind them to reschedule. But this school is actually integrated texting in as part of its contact strategy. So now it's sending 2 text messages in its initial 5 contacts that they're trying with the prospect, 5 contact attempts. And so it's led to a much better success, and it created a lot of exciting results for them using texting as part of the contact strategy. So it just goes into synchronizing and combining different methodologies, and that was the point I wanted to bring up with a true life story.
No, you make an excellent point. I'm going to add to that, because it's part of that, what Steve is describing, right, is an integrated communication strategy. But there's one more element that must be highlighted, which really ensures that an institution is able to deploy customer-centric strategy, communication strategy, which is synchronization. I have seen time and time again, communication programs or efforts that are executed in silo. They're not synchronized. So just for the sake of providing you with an extreme example, I've seen a situation where a traditional, regionally accredited, not-for-profit institution, in New England, has decided to add online education to their programs, and they're doing well. And all of a sudden, they are able to expand their market, and they have students anywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast and all the way up to Alaska. Not a lot of them, but it's growing rapidly. But they're having problems. All of a sudden, their yield, as their market expands, their yield, their conversion metrics are suffering. So what's going on here? The lack of synchronization in the communications is critical. Understanding what type of communication each and every one of the prospective students is receiving is critical. In this case, you had a prospective student in Alaska whom received the communication being told that he or she, I don't remember, could stop by the Office of Financial Aid located in Hall X between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's great if you're an on-ground student on campus, but if you're a student in Alaska, you just very quickly decided to go with another institution. And that's, the degree to which you build in integrated marketing communications efforts that includes communication tactics that are customer-centric, means also understanding not only the behavior, the consumer behavior, if you will, but also understanding the target audience that you're dealing with.
Exactly. And one other point about, customer-centric strategies, Marcelo, is we found with this same school, they're actually getting a higher response rate to SMS than they do phone calls, which is very surprising. I mean, maybe that's not to some who are listening in today, but this is what we are being reported. It's being reported to us on. And this takes us to our point on the customer-centric strategies, that this flight school's high response to SMS might be due in part due to the school's programs. They offer they're offered to younger students, 17 to 34 years old typically, which is different from a lot of typical education programs that target adults. But the school's use of SMS texting meets that need for that demographic. And so it's a younger student's preferred choice possibly here. So you just have to think about that. And that market segment may decide that they want to communicate via text. So you just have to adapt to what the prospective student likes the best as far as a contact strategy.
Good point. So now we're moving to gap number 2. Steve, it's all yours.
So we're going to talk about essentially 3 ways of getting ahead of the curve. This is another gap that we're going to focus on today with everybody. The first is what we like to call first responders advantage. And in first responders advantage, we talk a lot about the idea of how you want to be the first school that makes contact with a prospective student. And right now, if you take a look at what's happening in the marketplace, whether you're talking about a graduate school program or an underground, a brick and mortar undergrad program, you're going to get a lot of responses from individuals who are looking to look into schools. We see, in reviewing information out in the marketplace, that most prospects are looking at anywhere from 3 to 7 institutions when they consider a school choice. So getting in first with the student is obviously very important, but one of the things that we've done at Velocify is we've done a lot of analysis about how important that actually is. One of the things that we found is that we found in a joint effort with SparkRoom that 70% of prospects who fill out an inquiry form expect to hear contact within 24 hours. And so it's very important that you're the first school to get in touch with them, because when you tie that to enrollment or an application rate, we found that in our studies, in looking over 3.5 million inquiries that have been run through our system, we've evaluated it and we've looked at it in this way that in diagnosing the information, we found that if you are the first school that responds to a prospect and you do it within the first minute of inquiry, and I know a minute may sound a little dangerous to some listening in today, but this is just what we found in our information. If you're the first school to respond, you're almost 400 times more likely to convert that prospect at that time than at any other time that inquiry lives within your system. So you want to be the first school to get in touch with them because you've got the best chance to enroll them. And so we focus on that, and you need to make sure you're aiming your technology so that you can be the first school that responds, not just with an email, but also with a phone call. So that's something to keep in mind. We also talk about being persistent, but don't be annoying to your prospects. There's, you see schools that might call a prospective student 25 times within the first couple of weeks of having an inquiry in their system. You don't want to necessarily annoy your prospect. You want to persist, but don't be over the top with it. What we've found in our research is that the right number of calls has been 6 calls. And what I mean by that is we found in the same study where we analyzed speed to lead and how that affects enrollment, we found in the same study that the number of calls that was made up to 6 calls, we found that 95% of the enrollments happened in this study within the first 6 contacts. And after that, only 5% ended up enrolling after call number 6. So you have to think about the number of calls you're making. You have to think about, you need to think about the fact that are you in a situation where you're calling too much or you're not calling enough? You want to make sure that every call counts. And the same goes real fast. One thing I wanted to mention on First Responders Advantage, I meant to bring up an example, and this is again from our flight school. The school has been with Velocify for basically 1 week, and the school was able to make extremely impressive improvements on First Advantage movement with prospective students. What they were able to do is basically improve speed to lead from an average of 4 hours of response time down to 20 minutes. And so what you need to think about is blending in your technology so that you can get concrete results with fast response. And they turned their average calls from about 80 a day into a 150 a day using our system. Now, again, if you've got technology out there similar to Velocify, use it in the right way, maximize your calls, and you can create good advantages. So that's what I wanted to focus on with tying back to First Responders Advantage. The last thing is just make sure every email that you do and every call you make counts. And that just reverts back to making sure that you are creating contact that's sensible to your prospect. You want to make sure that you're not repeating conversations. You know the program of interest that they've inquired in. You have all the ready access at your fingertips on the data of the student. You know their background. You have all the information on previous calls, and it's very important that you don't remind them of conversations you've already had and have to start over. So that's very important. We're going to move on to gap 3, which is a failure to meet student prospects and expectations. And what we talk a lot about here really is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's quite all right. I want to jump in and give you, expand on a couple of items on that prior slide on the gap 2. So I'm not seeing the slide at this point, but in any case, there you are. We're talking about a couple of things that are important here. More often than not, I find myself having conversations, so we all do, with traditional institutions that are resistant to the idea of what's perceived as aggressive outbound effort. Okay, they tend to think of that as what a for-profit university would do. And in fairness to that statement, for-profit universities have historically engaged in rather aggressive enrollment management tactics. However, that's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about best, recruitment practices, not necessarily aggressive recruitment practices in relation to the competitive landscape. The takeaway here should be that if you put in place a system that allows you to more effectively reach out to students, to effectively compete for share of voice or with other institutions that are capable of reaching out to an inquiring prospect as soon as possible, that you're not in effect compromising on selectivity best practices. It doesn't make your institution less selective. It simply allows your institution to more effectively compete in what's increasingly becoming a difficult landscape for higher education. It does not matter if you're dealing with distance education, online education, you're dealing with a broad range of institutions from proprietary to public, non-profit, for-profit. I mean, regardless of what labels you want to utilize, it is a crowded landscape. If you do not believe that you compete with a for-profit university, I assure you, you are. You just don't know it. You need to take a look at that. But even if you did not, you will find yourself competing with a regionally accredited, not-for-profit traditional institution, such as, let's say, Southern New Hampshire University, that's able to get back on the phone to a prospective student within less than a minute of them having received that inquiry. So again, the takeaway here is not, and this is applicable, by the way, to both traditional on-ground. The traditional colleges have dealt with quite a bit in recent years, shrinking high school populations, shifting demographics, state funding fading away. So when you throw all that into the mix, the level of competition for on-ground students and distance education students is increasing at a very fast rate. And again, you're not compromising on selectivity best practices. You're simply fine-tuning your operation to more effectively compete in a complicated, crowded marketplace. Thank you, Steve. Sorry about that.
No, those are great points, Marcelo. Very well said.
Let's
go ahead and talk about the failure to meet student prospect.
I cannot hear you. I don't know if that's just me or somebody else.
No, I'm speaking into the phone. Am I clear or no?
Now you are. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. So the third gap is a failure to meet student prospect expectations, and we're talking about how you use technology basically in today's marketplace. And so the key thing here is to automate routine tasks. You want to get away from paperwork flow as much as possible so that you can free up your admissions representative's time to focus more on prospective students and less on administrative work. This comes into the level of automation that you create for yourselves. You also want to take admissions advisors' roles to a different level. You want to enable them to basically focus squarely on the purpose of meeting the needs of potential students while staying in alignment with the regulatory environments of today. So you want to take your emails, you want to take your text messages, and you want to automate those as much as possible. What you do in those situations is in the background, you create the verbiage in the text and in the emails that you want to message. A lot of times we see marketing departments of our clients do that, and you automate them so if a specific call is made, an automatic email or a text message is triggered out beyond it that falls into line with where that particular prospect is in the enrollment cycle. So you automate those tasks so that you eliminate manual emails going out, manual text messaging, and even if you can do it with automated dialing or click-to-call dialing, make the dialing as simple as possible with one click and a call is made versus having to manually make phone calls. It speeds the process up tremendously, and it gives you an advantage over your competition. The next focal point is basically leveraging the prospect journey insights to build good trust. And what you're talking about here is becoming the Amazon of admissions. You want to create a great experience for your customer, your prospect. You want to create good insights on the student journey for them. You want to know where every prospect is in the admissions process, what program they might be exploring, if they've scheduled a campus tour. You want basically more productive conversations. You don't want to have to repeat stories from the beginning during each interaction. With the focal point of gamification, we talk a lot about gamification at Velocify because in our product Pulse, which is our Salesforce solution, we have a gamification module in that solution, and it creates fun competition on the floor of admission staffs for those schools that embrace gamification. And what you can do is you make the job more fun, you create more engagement on the floor, which creates more excitement with prospective students. We have an example of a Velocify client that uses the data that they get out of Velocify to create productivity competitions for their admissions teams, where at regional campuses, they basically are looking to get bragging rights for who set the most campus appointment tours that week. And you run contests around it, around appointment set or calls made in a day. It's friendly, it's fun, it's not uncompliant in any way. So that's just one of the focal points of gamification. Marcelo, did you want to add anything to these points?
No, those are all good points. I'm good. So we're going to talk now about insufficient enrollment insight. And this is an interesting area because every now and then I run into people don't really understand what that means. People, in fact, you speak to admission stakeholders and they'll say to you, we understand what's going on at admissions. Excuse me. Moreover, we're fully capable of managing a prospective student funnel effectively and hitting our enrollment metrics. And then again, every now and then I hear about diminishing returns or problems with getting as many number of students that people used to get before. And again, all that, as I mentioned earlier, has to do with the competitive landscape. So let's talk about what that means in terms of, for example, identifying and removing defects to minimize variability. One of the areas that we always look at is an institution's ability to effectively manage the inquiry to application and application to file complete and file complete to enrollment funnel. Okay? So what does it mean to remove process variability? To ensure that each one of the steps that go into matriculating a prospective student, are coordinated or integrated, coordinated, synchronized in such a way that no matter what happens, each and every single step will be executed upon the exact same way each time. In order to achieve that level of synchronization and optimization of the process, it is first important to identify variability and what are the variables that drive that. And I'll give you an example. So dealing with one institution, I asked the question, how long does it take for once an institution receives a transfer from another college or university, how long does it take for the institution or the admissions department to conduct a degree audit and provide the applicant with a report on how many credits would transfer in? And that institution replied, or the person with whom I was having this discussion replied, that we can get this done, the same day. Within 24 hours, we can, having received it, it would be out, the student would have that information. So you're thinking to yourself, phenomenal, and you can do this every time. It goes, absolutely. Every time we get one transcript, within 24 hours, it'll be processed into a degree audit. The student will know exactly what transfers in or not. The challenge with that is that no one necessarily takes into consideration how long does it take for that transcript to find its way to the desk of the person that will get it done immediately. And I'm not going to get into the specifics, but of why, but I can tell you that at that particular institution, it was taking up to 4 weeks for that transcript to be delivered to the desk of the person that would in fact conduct the degree audit. What is the problem with that? Other than, is clearly not a reflection of the institution's capabilities in terms of processing application materials. The problem itself is the disconnect. You have competitors in this landscape, okay, for both, again, across the whole spectrum of institution type, if you will, offering both on-ground and distance education. You have institutions that are capable of processing an engaged inquiring prospect through registration in 2 weeks. I've seen it that faster, but on average, there are institutions that can do it in 2 weeks. The institutions with which I was having that conversation was taking 72, 75 days, something like that, to take an applicant, not an inquiring prospect, but an applicant for registration. When you're attempting to either mitigate, shifting demographic trends or I guess a more, the challenges of a more competitive landscape, or looking to more effectively compete with institutions that are able to process, the return and inquiring prospects request for information as soon as possible and effectively manage the funnel, synchronize it. If you're unable to do that, what happens is during those 4 weeks that transcript is floating around, nobody knows where it is, those students end up going elsewhere. So they ultimately, unless you truly understand each and every step that it takes for the institution, for your admissions department to be able to take an engaged inquiring prospect through the application, process the application materials, registration, and so on, you really have no way of knowing what degree of process variability you have built into the system, and you really have to roll up your sleeves and understand the degree to which you are able to complete the landscape and this landscape. Beginning with, once again, conducting a competitive analysis that will give you insight into what other institutions are capable of doing. Personally, I recommend even applying for admissions at other institutions just for the sake of understanding how those institutions manage their funnels. But in any case, that's critical. You really need to understand everything that goes into that process. And once you understand it, begin the process of removing that variability. Second is integrating data. And what we mean by that is we all know that good marketing results in good inquiring prospects, which should result in applicants that will convert into registered students. But what if the enrollment management system, the operations, is broken? What if it's in fact taking you 4 weeks to process a single transcript? Is that a reflection of marketing? So if marketing does not yield the number of enrollments that were forecasted, so in which direction do you point the finger? Is it a marketing problem or is it a sales problem? In this case, admissions. it is important to integrate data because the reality is there is no such thing as it's always marketing or it's always admissions. There are variations of what could happen, permutations of the different type of challenges you may face. So being able to integrate your data to really analyze conversion, marketing, conversion into inquiries, applications, and enrollments in relation to operational effectiveness is critical. It's difficult to do so. The first step is communications. There are agencies such as Velocify, Sparkroom, many other agencies out there that can come in and help you through that process. But as long as you take the first step of understanding that the integration of enrollment management practices and marketing is critical, and understanding how operational efficiencies can impact marketing and vice versa, you're moving in the right direction. Then leverage that enrollment data outcome. Because if you think about it, the other side of that equation is, okay, we've realized, let's say, 100 enrollments. And out of those 100 enrollments, 50 students are highly persistent, they're doing well academically, they're likely to be retained into next year. Okay, can we tie the probability of strong academic performance to marketing channel? What if we were to identify correlations? What if a given messaging strategy, a given creative, a given marketing channel is more likely to generate a student that is better prepared to do well in college? I'll give you an example of these. The type of student that responds to, and I recognize most institutions do not engage in these type of practices, but some institutions in the past have and learned the hard way that you shouldn't do this. So if you use messaging strategy that says free money for college, as opposed to challenging career preparation that will, help you hit the road running upon graduation. Well, the people that respond to anything that has to do with challenging career preparation, hit the road running, tend to do academically much better than anyone that responds to any type of messaging strategy that deals with like free money. Because if you think about it, the psychology behind it is very straightforward. I have nothing to lose, so I might as well enroll, see what happens, as opposed to I want to apply myself, do well, improve my life. So who you're appealing to is important, right? So understanding the degree to which you can realize outcomes to improve on your marketing efforts is critical. Reigniting age leads, I typically, it depends on the degree program, on the type of institution, on ground, online, but, conversion from inquiry to registration varies. It could be as high as 25% or higher, and it could be as low as 2% or even lower, depending, again, on those different variables. Regardless of the net conversion, you will have in your system a database of students that for one reason or another decided not to take that step. They may not have been ready at that point, but they're already thinking about it. Okay, as you improve on your systems, integrate your data, leverage outcome data to improve marketing spend, you can also incorporate some of those best practices on how you manage a dormant pool of inquiries. I have seen Sparkroom has worked with a large number of clients over the years, and I have seen on average somewhere between let's call it 3 to 3.5% of all starts attributable to any marketing efforts to come from the effective re-engagement of dormant or age leads, which is important. If you think about it, if you do not engage with those leads, somebody else is. And most importantly, if you do engage with them, and all of a sudden you can rely on anywhere between 3 to 4% of your start to come from those older leads, that you've made a significant impact on your conversion and your cost metrics, right? Lastly, this is important. Don't rely on last click attribution. So we're talking about improving the systems, improving, integrating data, leveraging data to improve marketing. Okay, but what happens if at the very front end, we really don't understand consumer behavior and what is the prospective student path? I had an institution once, some of you may currently work with aggregators or affiliates, also known as pay-per-lead providers. Okay, and pay-per-lead traffic or inquiries are not something that 100% of institutions out there are necessarily found on. The reason why is because these are, yes, many of them, most of them are qualified, but the degree to which many of them are also non-well qualified is a problem, can be a challenge. Also, you have to really manage large numbers of aggregator inquiries to realize a small yield of enrollments, and it's not atypical to run into institutions that will realize somewhere between 1% and 2% conversion, which means now you have to expand on your admissions teams and so on, your infrastructure, if you will, in enrollment management to manage these fast-growing funnel of aggregator third-party inquiries. The reason why institutions engage with those sources is because the scalability of those programs or those channels are much, it's much greater than the scalability of any other type of digital marketing or even traditional effort. So pay-per-click, if you're able to engage with Google AdWords, and do some pay-per-click, you may be able to get somewhere between 15 to 25% of all the inquiries you need, depending on a number of variables. And then you're going to hit a ceiling. So as your enrollment goals continue to increase, you may need to expand it on the channels that you're engaging. Sooner or later, you could find yourself and need to engage in PPL. So now you have institutions that deal with PPL that realize the amount of effort and resources that go into effectively managing that, and they go, you know what? Never mind, we don't need this anymore. And they get rid of it completely. Partly because perhaps they were able to optimize their website, so through SEO, pay-per-click, social media, traditional, they are comfortable with the current rate of growth. And they know that as long as those channels continue to perform as well as they are, they can simply pull the plug on PPL. And I've seen it happen. They pull the plug on PPL, and all of a sudden the organic traffic goes down, the pay-per-click is not doing as well, and so on. Why? Because the share of voice that affiliate aggregator portals will give you, it basically expands your brand equity, brand awareness. A lot of people find themselves researching institutions on third-party portals. They see your brand once, twice, 3 times. Their awareness is there. Next thing you know, they're visiting your website directly, or they see your brand again on a pay-per-click ad. They click on it, and so on. Cross attribution is critical and something that most institutions do not understand. I have seen institutions go from hitting their enrollment targets to not hitting their enrollment targets because they, without insight, without analysis, decided to reallocate or remove a marketing channel altogether. So it's very important that you work with a partner that understands how to measure marketing performance holistically, taking into account every moving part in that marketing mix. So post-application attrition, I like to talk about, we talk about the gap between application start, nurturing efforts, how to engage with students, how to keep that going from start to finish. Why? Because the enrollment management should be in an ongoing, or the enrollment management team should be an ongoing part of the student's experience. So let me expand on that. Typically what happens is an enrollment management team or an admissions department will get a student to apply. They will accept the student will enroll. Somewhere along the line, that student will be introduced to academic support service and academic advisor and so on. But the job of the admissions department is pretty much done and over with. So let's start first with academic advising. So what happens then? You have an academic advisor that most likely is going to help the student or register the student to the first course and get the student going, help the student hit the road running. Make sure the student knows if he's on campus, where their classrooms are, where the library is, what academic support services are available to him or her, if he's online, how to log on to the learning management system, most likely Blackboard, whatever else you may have. Bottom line is, you will have someone that will help you get started, and that's a good beginning. But thereafter, that relationship kind of goes a little bit cold, right? And academic advising really does not engage with you or with a student unless there is academic failure. So we tend to take, institutions, generally speaking, tend to take a very reactive approach at addressing academic performance or academic failure. The student is doing great, no need to talk to him or her. The student failed, let's reach out. As opposed to, let's make absolutely certain that we understand what is the probability of a student failing. Now, having worked with hundreds of institutions at this point, I can tell you that certain things are no-brainers, right? And it may vary from institution to institution, but there are certain things that are predictable. Some may say demographics are predictable in terms of academic performance. As it turns out, not always, but sometimes. What most people don't look at is the fact that if you're dealing with a return adult student, the probability of failure in a quantitative class is much higher than anything else. So if you have a return adult student that hasn't taken math in, 10, 15, 20 years because they went to work, they have children, and they're coming back, these are people that may have even done incredibly well in high school. People that may come to you, to your institution with credits for, maybe 10, 15 years ago, they took some community college credits, or maybe they enrolled in a 4-year college and they did incredibly well. But nevertheless, they haven't taken a math course in that long. And now you're going to register that person their first module or semester in, let's say, college algebra. Guarantee you the probability of academic failure right off the bat is incredibly high. So you have two options. You can wait until they fail, and then academic advising can reach out and say, hey, how come you fail? Or you can proactively reach out to them at the moment of registration and say, hey, we know you're registered for this course. This is a challenging course. What's the last time you've taken mathematics? These are the resources you have. I want to reach out to you every single week. Let's touch base. Let's make sure you're doing fine. If you have any problems, you can call me directly anytime, or these are my hours. This is my availability. One thing that is not atypical is that more often than not, academic advisors are simply not reachable. Even though you may have been introduced to someone, good luck getting in touch with this person. So is to give someone a strong indication that, or to ensure that the student knows that someone is available to them is critical, because that in itself improves the probability of academic performance. The second a student feels that they are alone, that nobody's supporting them, then your attrition comes into play. So that's one example. Other examples is start, when you look about the mind between application and start, the number of times that we've seen students fail to start after having completed application, enrolled, engaged with academic advisor and so on, they fail to start because they never received the textbook. So really understanding every element, we talked about process earlier, minimizing process variability. It doesn't stop at the prospective student applying and was accepted. It keeps moving forward. The degree to which institutions understand that the student has everything they need at, on day one to hit the road running, to do their work, and the support, and that they understand that the support they'll need is available to them right off the bat is critical. nurturing efforts, effective communication. Again, it doesn't matter if it's academic advising or a communication from, let's say, a supporting department like financial aid. It's important to proactively communicate. But what happens? More often than not, a student will find himself, herself disconnected from the institution. It happens on ground, and it happens to distance education students as well. What I mean by that is, who do I call? I was unable to foresee this from happening. My admissions person never told me that this could happen. My academic advisor never told me, yeah, I spoke to someone at financial aid, but I don't know who to call. I got to call an extension. I call someone at that extension. I'm going to have to explain this to someone all over again. Let's go back to earlier. I was talking about a student-centric process. So the degree to which customer support is proactive and student-centric is critical. But how do we ensure that we have a process in place that drives that? Well, we establish a relationship. And the person who owns that relationship is first and foremost the first person with whom they spoke, more often than not, an admissions person. The institutions that I have seen engage with the student most successfully truly impact the probability of students being academically successful, highly persistent, retainable, students likely to finish, are those institutions that establish relationship with their students, where the enrollment advisor or admissions advisor establishes a relationship with them. And, for example, communicates clearly that if at any given moment throughout your entire academic career, you do not know who you need to call or how to solve a problem, call me back. I will sort that out for you. I will make sure that you get the resources you need. In that, at the front end of that relationship, that proactive approach managing the student life cycle, if you will, improves the probability of academic performance, retention, and graduation tenfold.
Well, thanks, Marcelo. And just to summarize things up, we've got about 5 minutes left. I mean, the bottom line is that, in today's market, schools can create a more predictable path to enrollment success by prioritizing, synchronizing the entire enrollment life cycle. It starts in marketing, it goes to inquiry management, goes to pre and post enrollment contact strategies. But basically, you're looking to build great foundations for good relationships between your prospects and your institution. So to do those things, as we've talked about today, you want to make sure that you're integrating and synchronizing the enrollment management team, benchmarking, and basically understanding the key drivers of enrollment success. You've got to be able to implement data-driven decision-making for continuous improvement. So you have to know which enrollment representatives are doing better than others, act accordingly on it, combine that with the marketing performance you're getting from all the inquiry sources you have, use your data, make good decisions, cut out the sources that aren't working, add more to ones that are, and you blend your data so that you get better results. We also want to focus out, as we said, on start student engagement early, and you continue it all the way through graduation with as much automation as you can in the process. So that's kind of just a summary of what we wanted to cover today, and hopefully some points were taken that help you all.
Well, thank you, Marcelo and Steve. That was fantastic information. We got a few questions even while we were going. So we only have a few minutes. I'm going to ask one question that could lead to a 15-minute answer, but we've got to try to figure out the 1-minute version of it. In a decentralized model, do you find that the prospects respond differently to outreach from the university's main admissions unit compared to a specific campus or academic program reaching out?
That's a good question. The answer is yes and no. I mean, ultimately, it depends on the complexity of the institution, the scenario we're talking about. But I can tell you this much. Decentralized, let's assume that decentralized means that various campus locations have they can operate to with some degree of autonomy. Okay, as long as the operation, as long as the each one of those siloed enrollment management organizations work, specialize in their efforts or concentrate on their efforts for a specific campus location, synchronize their efforts and proactively manage the student application process, they should be able to achieve the same level of effectiveness, and they should be able to maximize their conversions as much as any other integrated synchronized organization. However, if what you're talking about is a non-integrated organization where each one of the functional units that typically must coordinate efforts to manage the prospective student life cycle, if those functional units are working in silo, yet each and every one of them do their job incredibly well, then I will remind you that what we're talking about here is minding the gap, right? And the degree to which an institution understands what happens with handoffs, right? Once that Department A is done, and then Department B needs to start working on something, it's critical. And I'm going to give you an example that's relevant to, I believe, this question. Application file complete. Oftentimes, what deems an application file complete is the degree to which certain application materials have been received or not. And you have various departments oftentimes determining that. So now you're relying on financial aid saying that, yes, the student submitted the FAFSA and we have received the ISER. Great. And then you have another person that will report through a CRM or a student information system that transcripts have been received and processed. And then you have another person in another department saying essays have been received, processed, or approved. Well, the degree to which each one of those people are communicating can have a significant impact, negative or positive, on the application process and the institution's ability to really integrate and streamline the student life cycle, right? So they may very well be doing their job incredibly well within their respective functions, but that does not mean that they are communicating effectively across the spectrum, if you will.
Fantastic. Well, it is 3 o'clock. We got some more questions, but what we're going to do is just respond by email, reach out to those folks individually. For anyone who didn't submit a question, you can feel free to submit them to webinars@sparkroom.com or sales@velocify.com. If you're not sure who the questions should go to, feel free to send to both or one of us, and we'll share the questions across the teams. And if you haven't already, don't forget to download the Mind the Gap white paper or ebook, actually, which is available on both of our websites. So you can find it at velocify.com/resources and at sparkroom.com/resources. Both of those spots have additional fantastic resources. So I recommend going to both of our websites to download some really good resources about enrollment management, enrollment marketing. And with that, thanks to everyone who stuck it out till the end. This has been a great webinar, really informational. We hope everyone enjoyed it. And with that, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. For more performance marketing resources, including our series of on-demand webinars, go to sparkroom.com/resources.